All right, good evening. Welcome to winter. Call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock exactly. First item on the agenda is, I guess, we'll ask if there's anybody in the audience that has anything to bring forward outside of the agenda. The other item is any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda. We do have, go ahead.
I didn't know if Tom you had a concern about an order of agenda items, but you're good, okay.
Okay. We do have, the last item is consider a motion to go into executive session, and we just had a brief discussion that it may be appropriate to go in to just discuss observatory, the last moth of the
Heading south.
Observatory Road, a long agreement we've had with Goodrich.
Well, it was originally the Goodrich family.
Yeah. And so there's been some input on that. It may be appropriate, since it is a contract, sort of a contract with the town. We may go into executive session, or I suggest we do, just to have a brief update for the select board. Okay, with that, we'll go to agenda item 3, Trails Committee.
Get the guest of honor seat.
Come sit up and talk about a grant application that's being made. And I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you give us the complete.
Hi, Phil.
Hi.
I think you had information in your packet, and the short version is that in consultation with Mike, it's clear that this long-awaited trailhead parking area just isn't something he's ever going to get to, and so he encouraged us to seek a grant, which the Vermont Recreation Trails Program grant is very applicable to this. I mean, this is a real fit. And so the Trails Committee would like to submit a grant. Pre-applications are due December 1st. Full applications are due February 1st. And so what I'm asking the Select Board for tonight is kind of go ahead to submit the grant, to do the work to get the grant, and then also to agree to the match. It's a cost reimbursable grant that requires a 20% match, but the match can be done in a variety of ways, one including in kind. And in going through we only have one estimate so far. We're hoping to get 2 others. But in going through that, Mike has already said that the town is planning to provide the gravel and the culverts. So that more than exceeds the 20% match. So I thought I was going to be coming to you asking for a cash match, but I don't think that's going to be necessary. So it's more really asking for your blessing to go ahead and pursue this.
So, the in-kind, the town road crew would provide gravel and culverts, but the actual machine work and labor would be contracted out
yes.
using the grant money?
Yes, that's the idea.
Yeah, I guess the question would be who's doing the trucking, whether the town would do the trucking or the contractor. And I would think that it might depend on scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, the one estimate we have, the contractors included the trucking cost in there, but, if that's something the town can do, great. I think we'd figure that out at the time. I mean, I don't know that
Probably
that's something.
best to leave it in the contract.
Leave it in the contract. Well, I mean, I guess it would be good if we see we get the grant. I mean, I would leave it in the grant for now.
Yeah.
That cost, but when we get an idea of what the schedule is, and if the timing is right, and I didn't see how many loads of gravel it was going to be, whether I don't think we have to go into it now.
Yeah.
Whether the road crew has the time to truck it, but it will generally be in the summer, and that's when we only have a 3-person road crew, which I would say is really the reason that we haven't been able to accomplish this on the town, but it is a town project. So I think it's very appropriate that the town is providing the the form of the gravel and the culverts, and if possible, could do the trucking. But let's leave that open for now?
Typically, the grants are reviewed in March. I've served on the review committee for a number of years, so I'm not on it anymore, and I would have to recuse myself anyway. But typically, the grants are reviewed in March, they're awarded in May, but the projects usually can't begin until July. So we're talking about next fiscal year. And as I recall, the grants are good for 2 years. So if there's some reason there's a hang-up of some sort, the money could be extended another year. So typically, you'd expect to accomplish the work in the summer or the fall, if it goes per usual.
And it's all happening within the town right-of-way?
The town right-of-way and/or within the easement, the trail easement. It's a 30-foot
Oh, okay.
wide
It's
trail
on Buck
easement.
Hill or
Buck Hill
Lavine
Road West.
Buck Hill, yeah.
It's at some, and if you're agreeable to going ahead with this, at some point I need a letter.
Is it Buck Hill or is it on, is it?
No, it's Buck Hill
Lavine?
Road. No, it's Buck Hill Road West.
So there's I assume the little picture of the hikers is where it's supposed to be located?
Oh, on the trail map?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh, okay.
approximately where it is.
Okay.
I don't,
I'm not sure which neighbors where they live who donated the land or the easement, but had the houses right in that area been consulted at all?
the Cudneys are the property owners on whose land the easement exists. And, a year or two ago, I wrote them at Mike's behest and said, we were going to do this, and then once again, we're not going to do it. I can make that happen, to notify those people.
There's two there. There's one right directly across the road.
Yes, the Leroys they know
okay.
this is going on.
Yeah, I would also say that what is of utmost concern in that section is the drainage. So, we should just make sure that we're not making any problems worse in an area which, a little bit above that, has notoriously been a difficult place. So, I think I'll make a motion to support the Trails Committee application for a grant application to the recreation, whatever it's called. To the Vermont Recreation Trails Program,
Second.
with the town supplying, just applying the match is fine.
In-kind match, yeah, 20% match. Is there any other discussion? So I would guess with this motion, you won't have to come back again.
I don't think so,
Yeah,
unless you
no.
need me to
I
for
don't
some
think so.
reason. But
That, unless
I've
something
worked
changes.
with Renee on
Yep.
getting the proposal in.
You will need a letter of support from the town.
Yeah, not for the
Eventually.
pre-application
Right.
stage,
Right.
but by the February deadline, yeah, I'd need a letter saying that the town supports the project and agrees to supply the match.
All right. So we have a motion to support this grant application. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed, so the motion passed. Can
you very
I
much.
just ask another question I was thinking about within the last week? The connector, I assume it's our Class 4 road between Buck Hill West and Buck Hill East. Has there ever been any discussion about making that a walkable path?
I haven't been on it recently, but a couple years ago, it was very walkable, and we put blazes up on it. So we
Yeah.
consider that part of the system. I haven't, and I don't know that anyone else on the committee has looked at it recently, but it's, of the various Class 4 roads, it's in probably the best shape in terms of, for pedestrian use.
Yeah, I was just thinking if you wanted to even ride your bike, I don't think it's a pretty rough walk, I thought.
It is
but-
a rough, I think that's one of the reasons that there's there's definitely erosion problems on that section.
Yeah.
And, if at a future date we could apply for some kind of, some other kind of grant to fix the erosion problems on a Class 4 road and/or reclassify it as a trail.
Yeah.
We could do that. And maybe by reclassifying it a trail, it might be eligible for, instead of it being a Class 4 road, it still maintains the town's right-of-way, and we could fix some of those erosion problems.
Class 4 roads are eligible for these grants. There's
okay.
more hoops you have to jump through. But I would also put Hayden Hill Road, east
Yes.
and west, in that
Yes.
same.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's the
You know,
same kind of connector.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and I can envision some partners
Yeah.
on doing that. It's just, there's only so many projects
Yeah.
we can take
Right.
on at one
Well, I
time.
mean, yeah, oh, yeah. No, I was just, I think, thinking about it only because, that North Road's not too bad. You got the 3-foot, right away along the road. So, and then, to come down into town from that area, if you could come all the way down Buck Hill, and then soon enough, there'll be a sidewalk for the remainder of the way, maybe right into town. So it's just a thought. But,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on our radar.
Yeah.
okay.
I'd just like to thank the Trails Committee. I think this is moving along, and it's unfortunate that you had to wait so long, but we have very capable people on the Trails Committee who can, I think, they're getting the estimates, they're working with Mike, and very grateful to the committee for doing this work.
Well, let's hope it's a typical year, because they often fund just about everything they get, but
Good.
you never know from
Yeah.
year to year. So
Yep.
we won't count any chickens just yet.
All right. Thank you, Lenore.
Thank you, Lenore.
Okay, the next item on the budget is a presentation from the Lake Iroquois Association. Chris Conan.
And Jamie,
Is
if you want
the,
to come and bring a chair too, you can.
Chair of the Lake Iroquois Association.
You might want to both share that mic, that would work. So there should be something else like this. That icon, and then there's mirroring on.
That's one trail I have yet to walk, is that one, that new one, the passing the Buck Trail. I haven't walked that one yet.
You got a long weekend to do it.
Just trying to get his packet up so
Okay.
we can get it onto the screen.
Do we want to start? Go ahead, just introduce yourself, I think.
Thanks, Bill. My name's Chris Conant, and I've met a few of you. President, Lake Iroquois Association, been on the board for a couple of years. Jamie Carroll is on the board with us as secretary, and we appreciate coming in front of you tonight. As I spoke to Renee over the last few weeks regarding what's going on Lake Iroquois, we really have had a very, very busy summer with lots of different projects. And I think one of the first things I'd like to do is recognize as one of our most important projects that we've had is our greeter program at the access area. And I'm sure all of you are familiar how the number of boats that come into the access have been allowed to come and go freely during the course of the last century. And we, in the last few years, have developed a greeter program which identifies educational components to try to prevent the spread of problem areas, invasives, into the water, and which we have been dealing with the Eurasian milfoil. The greeter program has been funded both from money that the town of Hinesburg, the town of Williston, and the town of Richmond has graciously given us, and we have met various matches with the money that has been given through the communities through state and federal grants. So part of the greeter program is that we are inspecting boats and water vessels that come and go on the lake during the course of the weekends. And so we're employing anywhere from 4 to 5 greeters during the course of every weekend, and through gracious donations and money that we've obtained. And so we inspect the boats, and we look at trying to educate the people that are using the lake and trying to prevent some of the problems that we are now dealing with. So it's been a great program, and we want to thank you for your participation in that. One of the pieces that we've had to deal with is that in the next year, the state is going to put a program in place where we're using hot water to wash boats with. And so our greeters now are going to be using pressure washer that we purchased through the grant program, and we're now washing boats as part of our program. And the reason why I brought this up first is that the town of Hinesburg Fire Department was gracious to participate in filling our holding tank. We can wash about 12 boats with 300 gallons of water, and we had a bit of a problem with our pumping system, pumping water from the lake into this holding tank, and the town of Hinesburg Fire Department came in and filled it for us throughout the summer. And so that's a great additive to our program, and so we want to recognize them. Greeter program is...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
About the greeter program, it's, do boaters ever refuse to have their boats washed?
We have a very, very well-developed program for the greeters that allow them to step back if the boat owners do not want us near their boat. So yes.
Any idea of the percentage of
I think that, I would say that 99% of the people that have come through our program are now willing to let us wash their boats. And we're now even doing small vessels, kayaks, and canoes also now, so that's a great program. One of the biggest disadvantages are we're only there on weekends.
Yeah.
Because of time constraints and also money to be able to put the program together. But it's a great program.
Okay.
We're working on it, we're excited about it, and we think it's going to continue to make a huge difference in the lake over the next decade. So that's one of the programs that we're working on, and we thank you for that. We just finished an aquatic plant survey, which Jamie's going to get into a little bit the Darren Freshwater Institute at Rensselaer Polytech has done for us this fall. And that program was actually paid for, or will be paid for, through money from the Richmond Conservation Commission, which was a great. This is our second time that we've done that, and that's basically looking at the plant life under the water. We have a program that we're working with. It's an ERP grant that is through federal funds that we worked on on Pine Shore Drive in Hinesburg, where we have created this, what's the word that I want to use? Basically a diversion in a stream bank, created by logs, creating a dam that spreads the water across this stream bank to prevent sediment erosion. And this program, we did it through the youth, alongside of the Youth Corps Conservation, where they came in and worked with us for 2 weeks. And through this program, this ERP program, we were able to develop this amazing project. And we're going to, with hopes that we're going to do this in other areas of the lake where water is flowing into the lake and creating sediment. And so that's throughout our whole phosphorus reduction plan. So are you good with your
No,
Okay.
Renee's going to try to get
Okay.
it from the other room. But
We're currently working on a program right now where we have aligned ourselves with the Lake Iroquois Recreation District, which is the governing body of the beach, which we all are familiar with, and the town of Williston, to look for funds to redevelop the structure of BB Lane, which feeds from Oak Hill Road down to the public beach and the public access. And so we're hoping that there's going to be, we've had an opportunity to tap into state funds and federal funds for the possibility of restructuring that road, also to reduce sediment and phosphorus runoff, but also to really the environmental impact that we're finding with the amount of traffic that's on that road during the course of the year because of the public access point. So that's another project that we've been working on. We're working with benthic barriers, which Jamie will tell you a little bit about, where we're literally creating these purchase of mats that would allow to control the weed population in and around the access area so that we can slow the spread of the milfoil throughout the course of the lake when there is boaters that are coming onto the lake and using the lake from the access point. And we're hoping that we can prevent the chopping of the weeds and the spreading, propagating of the weeds. So benthic barriers were installed in the fall, early fall, and then we have to remove them during a specific time. So normally they would go in by May 18th?
yeah,
15th?
after May, yeah.
May 15th, and be removed by October 15th. And so we purchased them through utilizing funds from the various resources that we have. And those benthic barriers are going to also be a great way to deal with the milfoil population. We're also looking at ways that we can use what's called DASH. Our DASH program is diver-assisted suction harvesting, and that is a way that we can also utilize money that we have gotten from the town of Hinesburg for milfoil reduction. So lots going on. Have I forgotten any?
No,
No,
covered it.
lots going on with Hinesburg and Richmond and Williston, St. George, and I'm a resident of the BB Lane area. I've lived down there my entire life. I have got to tell you that the Lake Iroquois Recreation District is, after watching it develop over the last 20 some odd years, is probably our community's biggest asset. And the resource that we have now with almost 200 acres that is protected from in and around the access area, in and around the beach, and behind the camps along BB Lane, which is all public access land. And I look at that as a child that was not being utilized the way that it is now, thanks to the BB family and the resources that were available through our communities, now are being utilized by thousands of people a year. And it's pretty amazing how much use year-round that area is getting. And it's pretty exciting, actually. So we've aligned ourselves with the Lake Iroquois Recreation District and working with them hand in hand in various projects. One of our board members, Jeff Davis, who is a Hinesburg resident, is on both boards, and that has finally created some unity between the groups. So do you want to,
Yeah, thanks, Chris. As Chris mentioned, I'm Jamie Carroll. I live in Hinesburg on Shadow Lane. Renee worked hard and was able to pull up our presentation here. Chris hit most of the things. This is the boat wash with help from the Hinesburg Fire Department.
Can you guys see that? You're all right? Okay.
The next slide is the work by Pine Shore, by the stream there that VYCC did, and also the Hinesburg Highway Department helped out with moving some materials for that project. The next slide is one thing we missed, Chris, was we restarted our water quality monitoring program through the La Rosa program. So Shannon, another Hinesburg resident, has been going around the blue triangles there. This is just a draft map, but shows all the tributaries of Lake Iroquois that he's been doing sampling on multiple times throughout the summer. And we have historic data going back, so this is a good reference to restart as we look to do projects like on Pine Shore and BB Lane.
and you've been working on, right.
So I think we can skip over this, and Chris hit all the things that are going to continue. So that's a picture of the benthic mat. This is one of the mats that was installed at the access. So it's 50 feet by 10 feet and held down by rebar. We have a permit just to install them in a small area by the fishing access. It's not a solution throughout the lake since it kills all the plants and affects fish spawning and that type of thing. But it is a solution in a little area like that. Renee, if you could just advance.
There actually is a number of residents around the lake that have permitted using benthic mats also in front of their cottages.
Yeah.
So,
These are two aerial photos taken by a resident of Williston on the exact same day, August 15th, one last year and one this year. They're not the exact same reference point, but we've seen a pretty dramatic change in the lake this summer from the summer before. There was quite a bit less aquatic plants throughout the lake, and we didn't have that kind of topped out still area near the access and near the beach, which was beneficial. We'll just have you scroll on to the next one. This is, on the left was the aquatic plant survey we had done in September of 2014, and we had that repeated by a different group from RPI, as Chris mentioned, September of this year. We just got a draft of that map, and if you scroll over to the new map, what they do is they go out and take samples at different points in the lake, and the new group there's more distance between the points, so it's not a direct comparison, but they found quite a bit of milfoil still existing in the lake, and we're going to make that, once we get a final draft of the report, we'll make that available on our website and share that with the town and things. They were able to sample the red dot there in the middle, is around the rock island in the center of the lake, and the previous survey, it was too rough that day for them to go out there, and these guys were able to get out there, and that's where they actually found the densest mat of milfoil this year. We've talked about this before, but the infestation has gone on since 1990. We did the survey in 2014. LAA has been looking at solutions for this for a while. We did do some dash last summer at the access, and then this summer did the benthic mats there. Along with the town of Williston, this time last year, LAA applied for an herbicide permit to treat the lake for milfoil. That the state issued a draft approval for that in the spring and still has not issued the final permit for that. Each time we talk with them, early in the summer it was months, and the last time we spoke with them it's weeks, but we still haven't gotten an update from them. And this is really kind of an unprecedented delay. Lake Dunmore applied the year before, they applied later in the year, and they had their permit sooner. There was recent treating for lampricide in the area, and that permit was issued on time. So what they tell us is there was a lot of comments to this permit, and they're carefully drafting replies to each of those comments. So we don't have an update on that at this point. Our intention is to pursue the herbicide treatment next summer if permitted. So that's our intention with that. I have one question about that. Sure, Tom.
You had mentioned that you used some of the money from Hinesburg for the suction, the diver with the suction. Is that
previous money
So not
We
the
haven't
10,000 or
touched-
whatever
We
it was?
haven't touched the money that
For the
was
sonar.
appropriated
Okay.
at town meeting last year.
right.
And we'll talk, you want to,
Well, the dash was done, most of the funds came from the state grant and aid program, and then there's always, it varies each year, but there's always a local match component. Some of that's done with in-kind volunteer supervision and things. In that case, that grant ran through the town of Williston, so their staff, labor administering and things, but each of these are weaved together with a variety of funds. Highlighting the aquatic plant survey, so we know we found a lot of milfoil in the lake in 2014, about 77 acres, or 2/3 of the littoral zone that would support milfoil. And if you just scroll on to the 17, we just got this draft, so I just pulled some highlights out of it. They found a similar number of plant species in the lake. Of the sampling areas in 5 meters or less of water, they found native plants in 92% of the survey points, which is a good thing, that the native plants are still there. At the points in less than 5 meters of water, they found 42 of them had milfoil. We can't make a direct apples-to-apples comparison, but I think it's a little bit down from the previous survey. And another thing to highlight is finding about 3.6. This is, math on plants in a lake, but finding a fair number of native plants at each of these survey points. So there is a robust, plant community in the lake. We also surveyed Sunset Lake. That was one of the comments that we received regarding that permit application. And it's a similar environment down there. I do see a typo. So there's 21 submerged species in Sunset Lake. Each of the sites below 5 meters in depth, which is the majority of them in Sunset Lake, they found a native plant, and they found milfoil in about 43% of them. So similar aquatic plant makeup in Sunset Lake as to what there is in Lake Iroquois. You guys have seen this slide before, but just highlighting other lakes in the area that have treated with either dash or suction harvesting or sonar or renovate. And we can...
sonar and renovate both are herbicides that are used in aquatic waters.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You can just scroll on next to the... So we continue to pursue the herbicide treatment. I did apply, or through the LIA, we applied to Lake Champlain Basin Program for some more dash harvesting for next summer. Should hear about that offering in January. And we did conduct the survey of Lake Iroquois and Sunset Lake. And then the last slide is just, there's one more for some cost. So this year, between the benthic barriers and the aquatic plant survey, we spent about $6,000 on milfoil control or research related to milfoil. If we were issued the permit for herbicide next year, that would cost about approximately $100,000 to treat the lake. Applied for the grant for $15,000 worth of dash. We would have to do notifications and follow up with permit work, and then our intention is to move forward each year doing an aquatic plant survey of the lake, regardless of what control is done each year, so that we can establish monitoring to see the effects. And Lake Hortonia has done that in the southern part of the state, and it's just really nice to be able to pull up those reports and compare them. Darien will go back to the exact same location each year, and you can use it as a reference to go back year to year. So our intention is to continue with that each year.
So the big question that remains is, number one, the monies that we have been allocated from the town of Hinesburg and the town of Williston are still unused at this point. And for the 2018 year. And, our intention has been right along to continue to pursue the sonar application. If for some reason we were denied the permit, we feel that our only options would be to pursue hand pulling and harvesting. Not a whole lot different than if Lewis Creek was identified as an area where there was invasive species such as loosestrife or some of the other species that have been put on a hot list. And we as a community would identify those species, and we'd go out and get an army of people to work really hard and get them pulled and make sure that the area was clean. Well, to be honest with you, we can't do that. You know, we don't have that option. We aren't going to get an army of divers down there, and we aren't going to be able to do what we would do if we were able to visually see them. So our options are the herbicide application and or possibly continue the use of DASH. And so our intention is to utilize some of the funds from each of the communities to build that program, that DASH program, if we don't do the herbicide application. We feel that it is kind of and have been told by the contractors that it could be a losing proposition, or possibly, in our eyes, a waste of money, but we don't have a whole lot of choices. So we aren't going to let the lake die, and the lake could die. And it's a resource that we really feel as communities we need to continue to protect. So what our intention coming to you tonight, our board has agreed that if we do get denied the permit, that we would, with your blessing, and Renee and I talked about this today, that we would ask that we could use $10,000 a year for this year and 19. So $20,000 of the $30,000 over the next 2 years for DASH, for milfoil control, for suction harvesting. And then we'd give you back $10,000 to put back into the coffers. But with the intention that we will be back to ask for a new program in the future, that we would be able to hopefully come up with some more tools in our pouch to be able to build some future protection for that lake and possibly Lake Sunset. Lake Sunset doesn't have an association that we are aware of that's active, but we have met people on the lake through our organization that want to work on with us on various programs. So hopefully we can align ourselves with them. We have a great group of people working really hard as the people that have worked on this lake for many years, one being Meg Handler. You know, we really have an amazing group of people that are working on this board with us. We want to continue that, and we want to align ourselves with other aspects of the community, such as Lake Sunset and LIRD. So with the blessing of this group, we're coming here to basically acknowledge and thank you for your community for believing in this program, but also to work with us to try to figure out how we can move forward, and without assuming that it's okay to utilize these funds for various aspects. It would always be used for milfoil control as the original intent of the money that was appropriated at town meeting. So.
All right, thanks, Chris and Jamie. So I think this board has always supported the association and sees the value in the lake, and there's no question about it. You approached through town meeting a motion to fund the first year, I think, for the herbicide treatment. And that passed. It passed. So certainly the board would support that. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at that motion, and that motion may be really clear that this is what the money's used for. So that might be a legal question we would have to take a look at, and we certainly will take a look at it. When do you think, so we're going through our budget process now. I think in the past, we've supported not everything you've asked for necessarily, but, the efforts of this committee. When are you expecting to get word from the state at this point, do you know? Because our budget process is starting, and, it would be nice to know that one way or the other.
Yeah, we acknowledge that, and that's why we're here at this time. We hope to hear from the state very, very soon. Chris and I did review the Article 10 from the town meeting over the weekend, and it was worded to support milfoil control. It didn't specify whether it was herbicide or dash or anything else. Certainly we would need to take a look at, because it was for this fiscal year. I think what we envision is, we're explaining where we're at, and hopefully we'll learn this month or next month. But we may have to come back in April and say the permit was denied and we want to do this for the summer of 2018 and just be upfront with you, and this is the challenge we face, or it was approved in December and nobody appealed it in January and we're going to proceed. So that's kind of the timeline we're looking at.
All right, and any other comments? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I
Andrea?
think that your proposal is that the $30,000 that was voted on, I looked at the motion also, and it says for Eurasian milfoil control. And so that money will be available until June 30th of this year. Yep. So hopefully we'll know, and then if we want to, we can hold those funds, reserve them for the following year, but if you were doing the dash, what time of year would you be doing that?
Between May and September.
Yeah, so it seems like if you're not asking for additional funds this year, that we have the capacity to reserve those funds that have already been approved. But I think we should have the lawyer look at it for sure.
Some discussion, and I'm not voting one way or the other, I'm just saying, even if that's what the wording was, the discussion was really clear about using herbicide, but, this may be it, so. Any other comments?
It's a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
And we understand that. That's why we're here.
But I think what is favorable is that there are funds available, and if you don't think that you're going to be asking for more for this year, then it seems like...
And one of the reasons why we felt that, releasing, if we don't do the herbicide application, releasing the other 10,000 that allows you guys to put it back into the, to be honest with you, we would love to, we had received $5,000 in previous years from the town of Hinesburg. We'd still like to be able to ask for that in the future, depending on what these programs are. I would expect to see us again for that. We appreciate anything that we can come up with. Right. We as a community over there on the lake, there's 90 some odd homes. Most of them are in Hinesburg. We realize that, but also we as a community have raised $32,000, $34,000, from just in the last year. So
I guess we could be in the situation where you would be back asking for another $30,000 this year, because that was our understanding last year, was that the $30,000 that was approved for the 2018 budget was the first, and that it would be something that we would be we would have needed to, you'd need to do another application, and it was going to be again between $20,000 and $30,000 for the second year, and that there would possibly be a third year.
Those other treatment years would be more years out, likely 4,
Wouldn't be
5, or 6
consecutive.
years out. So the 30 from the town of Hinesburg would be paired with monies from the town of Williston and the state grant, and these private funds would cover the first treatment. And then we would monitor with plant surveys for years and hopefully get grade control for a number of years and then reevaluate when it would need to be done. And then it may be, 30,000 again in 2021 or something like that.
I thought from reading it last year that it was going to be consecutive years that you were going to need to do the application, and then you would reevaluate.
There was a direct question about that at town meeting, put to me, and I said it was going to be less, significantly less, probably back to the $5,000 level, which helps us with, these stream restoration grants and all that type of stuff, so.
Have you considered that the amount of milfoil really seems to be precipitation dependent? That when it was so bad is when we had that really dry summer and we had a lot of rain in the spring this last year. Has that gone into your thinking at all?
Well, that has been one explanation for it, as well as the particularly warm winter of 15, 16 as well. So there was less ice and the ice was out sooner. So each person we've asked about this at the state and the researchers from Darien said, yes, weather plays a huge factor in it, yeah. I think this summer we all enjoyed a summer where the milfoil didn't interfere with recreation a whole lot, but it still is out competing the native plants. So there's still a compelling reason to move forward with this for the native plant community, so.
Okay, any more questions?
Well, again, I'd like to thank this volunteer group for their work, and I think it's important that there are people who are paying attention. I think it's also wanting to recognize that, a lot of this problem was precipitated by the lack of state regulations over the years that the state has only allowed this to get bad because as one of the New England states that isn't or hasn't been proactive in looking at, moving these invasives from lake to lake, we've only let it get to being more. And it's still not mandatory that they have these boat washes. And I really feel like, and here we are, you as volunteers, us as towns, taking care of a problem that the state has only let get worse. And it's just really unfortunate that we haven't been able to put on the books a regulation and then enforce it. So
There is a new regulation that the governor signed this summer and took effect July 1st. The DEC is still determining how to enforce it. But if the boat access has a boat wash station, people are obligated to use it if it's in operation. So that helps us. We did have a discussion with our greeters and the Fish and Wildlife officers this spring that they are not, our greeters are not law enforcement.
Right.
So we'll proceed safely with that. But so that does give us a little more strength, and the DEC is going to work on how to do that. But like you mentioned, our boat wash is kind of rare. There's like 3 others on small lakes, and we're not open 24/7, 365. Fortunately, a lot of the boats that come in and out of Lake Iroquois, so they're not a risk to reinfect. But Lake Champlain has got 50 non-native species in it, and they're just a boat ride away.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
Thanks for the update.
Appreciate it. Renee, thank you.
Good luck.
Public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. So,
Wait, Chris and Jim.
sorry, yeah, my fault. Was there some public comment on the presentation? Yeah. We have to use the microphone.
My name is Elizabeth Deutsch. I live at the southern end of Lake Iroquois, and I just want to comment on the fact that the Lake Iroquois Association does not represent all homeowners who are affected by this, that they are presenting it as if we are a united community, and we are not. There are a number of us who have really strong feelings in opposition to what they're proposing. We have brought this forward time and time again. I would like to see the town move forward on this in a way that is more democratic, instead of the Lake Iroquois Association just coming and presenting the community point of view, which is not all of the community, is their community, and does not include anyone else, and completely alienates those of us who do not agree with them. There's a lot of evidence on the other side of this story that they are not presenting to you. And at this point, no one from the town has ever given us an equal voice. And so until that happens, I would like you to wait until you hear both sides of the story. And at this point, you've never given us the opportunity to do that.
Other than, I mean, if you're talking about the use of herbicides, there were public comments, and so that would be the permitting process. And the only other time there was any decision that was made for this was at town meeting.
Right, so at that public hearing, I was there, and the Lake Iroquois Association was very clearly given a seat literally at the table, and we were not. They were given time to present an entire PowerPoint presentation, and we were not. So if you call that fair and equal, I have to disagree with you, sir. If you want to say that you're giving us a seat at the table, then give us a physical seat at the table.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd like to respond to that and again point out a kind of deficiency in the permitting process in this, is that was a state permit that was issued. The state does not ask for municipalities to weigh in on these situations, and I think that is a real drawback on the way that the state issues the permits. And so the town is not, in the past, has not had really any role in this, which isn't to say that we can't on our own ask for public comment in that process. So public comment on these kinds of things come when we are doing the budget. And so not only for this particular issue, but for any issue in which that the town, i.e. the select board and the voters of the town, are going to be making decisions, is really through the budget process. And so that's how that happens. And that, again, I point out that the state does not recognize the town as a participant in those public hearing processes. And so I would say that that is a fault in the permitting process, the way in the rulemaking that the state has done. And we, as a select board, can point that out to the state, and hopefully that can change, because I think that that is a problem for other communities that have multiple political jurisdictions around one lake. So. But you need the microphone. Yeah.
If you're going to say this is the town, from the town point of view, you're right. I understand that it is a state permitting process, but we're talking about $30,000 that was approved without much discussion at town meeting, where only, I think, 214 people were there out of the entire town. And so at that point, if we're going to discuss how a town can impact a state permitting process, if you don't fund it, it won't go forward no matter what happens with the permit. So from that point of view, the town does have a significant impact on it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's important to point out that the select board doesn't make those decisions on funding. That was made at a town meeting, an annual meeting, and the people who are there are the ones that make that decision. So, if we think any other decisions like this or any other important ones are going to be made, the citizens at that town meeting can make those decisions. So I think it's, as you say, it's important to have all sides have an opportunity to speak. And again, I apologize for not opening this up during this part of the session. So you're correct in that there are other voices out there. And certainly, I think our presenters acknowledge this is a controversial topic. Are there any other comments? Yes.
Hi, my name is Rodney Putnam. I'm a homeowner on Pine Shore Drive, and I just wanted to speak to the importance of a couple of ways that we've done. I dive. I'm a scuba diver, and my stepson, in the first summer on the lake, we hand-picked the milfoil. It was super thick in front of the house, and with no surface containment system that like the contractors with the dash use, it floats down and typically sinks and replants itself. So we installed 4 benthic barriers in front of our house. It's been very effective, and so if you don't go in one treatment and we shift towards the suction harvesting, I just wanted to voice it from someone who's tried it in front of my house. It's super important to have that containment that fully gets rid of the debris, and it just doesn't move to another part and reseed and start all over again. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, thanks.
Phil?
I would just like to say, from my memory at the town meeting, it was quite an intense discussion with both sides really presenting strong points of view. And when we had the vote, it was a paper ballot. And as I recall, it was very close, very close.
But we were not prepared for that, and they had time to prepare. It wasn't like we knew they were going to bring it up. So those of us who were in opposition did not get the chance to prepare our argument from that side.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Creekside flooding solution. This will be presented by Alex. Next time I forget to open it up, just hit me or something. Whop me on the side of the head.
So hopefully you all got my memo that was I gave to Renee to put in your packets.
Yes.
I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but for the viewing audience, I will recap. So I'm here to ask for authorization to spend $2,000 to have the town's consulting engineer, Tyler Billingsley, design a drainage solution for an intermittent flooding issue that's happening in the Farmall Drive, Frederick Way neighborhood, Creekside development, as some folks refer to it. And that issue is caused by a berm that extends from north to south across the Lyman parcel, which is just north of the neighborhood. And that berm was installed in 2011 when a subdivision far to the north along the Shelburne Falls Road frontage was approved, and a new private water and wastewater line was installed to help serve that subdivision, and also to help rectify some problems with the Ballard's Corner development. So in the process of installing that water and sewer line, there was gravity flow, and because of that, the need to have a buried line but not have it be buried by the typical at the typical depth to avoid issues with freezing and thawing. And so a berm was placed over the top of it, overburdened soil. And in the process, that created a bit of a dam. So as stormwater moves or used to move across the Lyman property, generally from east to west and a little bit from south to north, it would move across that field, and the berm created a barrier. A culvert was installed at that point to allow for drainage, but it's not adequately doing the job. And so there's a lot of water backup during major storm events. It does drain over a period of time. We had an event this summer, which brought it to the fore again. And during that event in June, I think it took, well, I don't know exactly how long it took to drain, but I know that checked it on Friday, checked it again on Monday. It was flooded on Friday, it was drained on Monday. So over the weekend, it drained. In any case, that's what's happening. The planning department has some, at least I feel we have some culpability in this, because when the subdivision happened in 2011 on Shelburne Falls Road, the DRB reviewed the subdivision. We were aware of the water and sewer line. We reviewed the plans for that. We were under the impression that this was an underground line and therefore didn't realize there was going to be any berm added on top of it. And no impact to the flood hazard area or the drainage and runoff in that part of the Lyman property. Unfortunately, we didn't see the plans properly, or we didn't interpret the plans properly, and the project engineers didn't call it out as an impact that needed to be addressed. So we didn't realize it until after the berm was constructed. I think it was in 2013 when we had our first sort of rainy summer, and it became evident there was a problem. So in any case, this is a private property issue, but one in which I've been working with the Homeowners Association President, Dan Jacobs, and the Bissonnette family who did the subdivision that created this berm, Joe Bissonnette in particular, about ways we could work together. And we've done some exploration. We did some in 2013. But there's a desire on the Homeowners Association front, and I agree with them that an engineered solution is probably the right solution rather than just throwing in a couple culverts and hoping that it works, doing your best shot at it. So my proposal is to have the town pick up that engineering cost and to have the developer, the Bissonnette family, pick up the installation cost for the culverts and get this situation remedied.
When did the culvert get put in?
Same time the berm and the water and wastewater line went in. So that whole project happened in the end of 2011, beginning of 2012.
So the culvert was put in thinking that that would solve any issues. I mean, you see a berm
Yeah,
there. There might be an issue, let's put a
There
culvert
was
in.
clearly recognition by the project engineer that some kind
Something,
of drainage needed to happen to get water from one side to the other.
Yeah.
It's not sufficient.
And 2,000 would cover this for Tyler?
Yeah, so this summer, when Dan Jacobs appropriately contacted me and said, Alex, we talked about this several years ago. How
Yeah.
come nothing's happened? And we just had another big rainstorm. I said, I let it drop, Dan, I'm sorry. And so I contacted Tyler and said, can you give me an estimate? And that was his estimate, was 2,000. He went out and took a look and said, I can design something for that.
It's reasonable.
From reading this a couple of times, it seems to me that the error was from the developer, and I'm pretty uncomfortable with the precedent of the town paying for this design. I don't see a valid reason for the town to be paying for that, and I think we will have many more stormwater issues coming up in the future, and to set this precedent that, we gave you a permit when we shouldn't have because maybe you did the design in a way that we didn't really understand, so we're going to pay for an engineer to create the fix. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, and I understand that reaction, Marilee, and it's absolutely true. I told Andrea this back in 2013. We don't have culpability in the sense of a legal obligation to fund the solution here. These are two private parties. There's a homeowners association that's negatively impacted and a private landowner who did some land development next door that caused that. With that said, it was a project that was reviewed and approved by our board. And it's one that all the parties are willing to work together on. And we as a town either can sit back and try to force parties to work together and fix a problem and take court action if that's necessary, or we can be a participant in solving problems that affect our neighborhoods. And this is a problem affecting a neighborhood. It's not a problem that is creating a true public safety concern. Houses aren't being flooded, streets aren't being flooded. It's a green space area that is used for recreational purposes that's difficult to manage due to the sogginess on wet summers. But in any case, that's my pitch. I understand your point of view. I think we are also working, as I mentioned, with the Pleasant View Lane neighborhood at the Ballard's Corner area to try to solve some flooding issues that are happening there that, once again, are not related to the town. We didn't cause those problems. Some might argue that CVU caused those problems when they did their expansion, but it's not entirely clear whether it was that or whether it was the Jiffy Mart redevelopment that happened next door. But that, in my mind, that was a win-win-win situation where we were able to work with VTrans and get a solution as a part of the intersection improvement. So I understand your point, but at the same time, I'd love us to be able to help.
I appreciate your attitude and wanting to work together, and I think that's admirable. I'm a little nervous that Joe Bissonette tentatively agrees. If that word tentatively were changed to wholeheartedly, I'd be much happier.
Well, Joe and I have had many conversations about this. He understands the situation. He'd like to see it fixed, but I didn't want to get him to sign any documents until I'd talked to you about it. If the rest of the board similarly feels like this isn't a good use of town dollars, then we'll be pursuing enforcement actions, and it'll be a very different conversation.
Okay.
Andrea?
Yeah, I guess I feel similarly to Marilee, as you know. And one is we don't have the $2,000 in the I don't know what budget item this would come out of.
That's a good question.
And the other is that I think before proceeding by taking any action, we are entering into all of a sudden the town taking responsibility of like who's going to keep those culverts cleared. I mean, I think there's legal implications to us beginning this work and paying for the design of it. And so I'd say before we hire an engineer, I would really like a legal opinion on where, and you know, you've said you don't think we have responsibility, but by continuing to try and address this with a common sense approach, I think it is a common sense, but I don't want a precedent to be set that we come in and solve problems that are really caused by you know, developers not having a robust enough review system to understand these plans and the implications of them, and relying on the state if there's state permits that are needed to do that work. So I think it points out that we really need a more robust review system, both from an engineering standpoint and possibly a legal standpoint, because this is a private water and sewer line that's going up there, and yet it's public water and sewer that's going in there. And what's the long-term arrangement that we have for if anything happens on that private line? Was there any kind of legal agreement in which the town has the ability to go in there and fix things on that, or is it totally on the private developer? So I think before we move ahead with doing any work, I'd really like for us to have a legal opinion on the whole water and sewer line and where our responsibility is.
So on the first question, which is a good one, there isn't any money in this year's planning and zoning budget for this $2,000 expenditure, but the budget will absorb it. The planning and zoning department budget comes in under budget every single year, and last year we came in under budget by nearly $20,000. So we run a fairly tight ship on the third floor, and I'm quite sure that we can cover it out of the budget, even if there isn't a line item associated with it. As far as what our having a legal review and what the town's position is moving forward, it was my understanding when that line was put in that the town would be taking over that. That's a major water and sewer line. It's not a distribution, or sorry, it's not a service line. It's a distribution line that's going to serve development all up and down the west side of 116 in the whole Village Northwest District. So I believe eventually that will be our line, and that will be our fill, and we will be a player. If we don't want to be one now, we will be one in the future. So I think it is to our benefit to see a properly engineered system. It should have been done at the beginning, and even properly designed systems can have issues and then have to be fixed, but I'd love to see it done now. We could certainly do a legal review from that common sense approach. My only hesitancy is I'd hate to spend more money on attorneys to find out whether or not we can spend a little bit of money on an engineer to get to a solution so that this neighborhood doesn't have to experience this next summer and the summer after that, depending on when we get heavy rains.
I guess I feel like, you know, I would feel more comfortable understanding what the long-term risks are to the town in terms of how we got into this position and not proceeding with engineering until we understand what that, what arrangements we have for, for this line. And, right now it's in private ownership. You've referred to this as Lyman's land, but there's the development that's proposed by Grabowski. I'm wondering whether the Mylone and McBroom study specifically was asked to look at the ramifications of fill on that project onto Lot 30.
Their project, which is a different project, looked at fill that encompassed all of this berm and everything around it. So that the Grabowski project on the Lyman property was a much more expansive area of fill than what this berm is. This is a thin line of fill right over a water line.
Right, but, I guess I'm reluctant to move ahead until we have some kind of understanding about what the long-term, ability of the town is to in responsibility on this line and how we've worked those things out, so.
Okay.
Any comments, Tom or Aaron?
Yeah. I like the idea of the collaboration. I think it's great. I think Creekside has helped us out. I think the Bissonnettes have been kind enough to put in that line, which is going to service the town long-term. And, upstairs trying to work this out. I do see the issues being raised and a couple more questions. I don't think we're in a pinch for the next 6 months anyway. Maybe to get some of these questions answered.
Yeah, time-wise, nothing is going to happen until spring.
I mean, I'm in favor of the collaboration, but I would like to see these questions be answered and what the long-term responsibility of the line is.
Okay.
And where the next development fits into the, the puzzle as well.
Okay.
So, but I do appreciate the trying to work together. That's
It is a little complicated in that it is Lyman property, but the Bissonnette family acquired an easement over the Lyman property to be able to install this line.
And then we will take over that easement.
And we will take over that easement, correct? And that area could be very close to a future town road that we would also take over. So there's a whole lot of intricate sort of pieces to this, many of which are out into the future and are somewhat unsure at this point. But, okay.
Has there been any thought put into trying to drain the area that's causing the problem to the existing culvert?
Yeah, so initially, that's what Rocky Martin and Mike Weisel and I back in 2013 looked at. Joe brush hogged the area, Rocky shot some grades, Mike Weisel went out and looked and said there's positive drainage, water is flowing to that point. The culvert is just too small, it's inadequate, and the suggestion was add another culvert or two, or open up the berm so there's literally a cut in the berm and do some insulating of the lines in that one segment. So we're pretty confident that there's a solution. The ultimate solution that some of us had hoped would happen was that the development of that portion of the Lyman property would have moved forward because the developer, Brett Grabowski, understands there's a drainage issue and is planning to fill that whole common area behind these houses and install a closed catchment system with a more, what do I want to say, a more directed stormwater treatment system with a detention pond and all of that. And that would completely eliminate the issue.
Why would it eliminate the issue for Lot 30?
Because that Lot 30 would be raised, and all the runoff would be catched into catch basins that would then flow to a larger stormwater treatment facility on the opposite side of the berm.
Even though Lot 30 is still owned by Grabowski?
That's why he has control over it. The ability to say.
And was it ever graded in the first place?
So what happened in that Creekside development was that the house lots were filled. The backyards on that side of the project were filled, but then graded down into Lot 30. And so, those backyards are okay. They're high enough, but the Lot 30 itself is the original grade.
It is the original grade, and they probably didn't even do any grading on it at all.
I don't think so. I mean, it got planted to grass, but, not testimony, but what I've heard from the residents is that there wasn't a whole lot of attention paid to great topsoil and the rest. So I think very little was done. It was just sort of graded down, and it's the same grade as it was prior to the development for the most part.
So there will be an internal catchment basement on Lot 30 as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that was the plan that the DRB reviewed and gave sketch plan approval for, and actually conditional use approval for all the fill based on the Milo and McBroom study. And they were very clear with the developer, you know, this is a neighborhood issue. You have to fix this as a part of your development. And the neighborhood was very clear at those meetings as well. But that's unlikely to happen in the near term because of our water and sewer limitations. So this additional culvert is just a short-term fix pending some larger development plan if it were to happen, which would be a longer-term fix.
Yeah, I think you're coming to us with a problem and a solution all at the same time. How refreshing. Usually they're just the problems.
There may be some issues with the solution, though,
Sure,
and
sure.
I understand that.
And I certainly share sort of the longer-term conversation and the need to examine how we do things, which you've stated, and we've articulated to you our same concerns. But I don't think it means that we have to not move ahead with solving this problem. I mean, I think if it's not going to take a lot of effort and we have everybody interested in finding a solution, I think we should move ahead with a solution in conjunction with everything else that we're talking about here needing to be looked at, especially since it's not going to happen between now and spring, right? You know, so we can get these answers. But conceptually, I'm okay with this, you know, and I think we should. If we have everybody here looking to solve this problem, let's do it. Let's move on this energy, and then as we've all said, you know, there are some other questions here that need to be addressed. But this is our first time we've been developing this, right? You know, on these larger scales, this is part of us growing, and I think we're doing a good job, you know, with learning where our weaknesses are, and then backfilling our knowledge and then putting processes in place. And this is yet another one of those examples where we have found perhaps a weakness in our process that we're able to now strengthen. Doesn't mean we shouldn't fix, or at least be part of the fix, you know, of taking care of some of those outcomes in the past.
Okay.
So, first of all, I commend you for trying to work through this. I hear the Creekside folks saying, you know, there's a problem, they want it fixed. I get that. It sounds like the landowner or the responsible party agrees there's a problem, perhaps, and willing to put some effort into it. I'm kind of leaning a little with Andrea, saying, you know, why are we engineering the solution, and then if it doesn't work or it becomes a problem later on, then all of a sudden our hands are mixed up in it. And it seems like the engineering coming up with a good solution, however that solution, whatever it is, it should be the landowner who does that too, to satisfy Creekside. And, you know, there are ways, I'm certainly hoping that it doesn't come to that. It doesn't sound like it needs to, that Creekside could say, wait a minute, this is, you know, a problem, and we're going to elevate it to make sure it gets fixed. I like the idea the town's involved and can add some value in there and watch out for not only our concerns, but also Creekside's concerns, and potentially the developer trying to find common ground. But I do worry about us putting the money out there to fix a problem that wasn't really ours. And, you know, I appreciate the fact you take some level of responsibility for not spotting what could be a problem ahead of time, but we're never going to be able to identify them all. So we want good engineering up front and, you know, and the best review we can have. And even if the town says everything looks good, that doesn't mean a developer or anybody else who does work in the town, that doesn't take them off the hook from doing a good job. So, you know, maybe the party who's going to work on this hires Tyler. He's not our town engineer.
Right, he's a consulting engineer.
Yeah, you know, and who knows the area really well and could do a really good job. And So that's sort of my feeling on it.
Okay, well,
I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
to get a legal, just get a little bit of legal opinion on our, how we can proceed. And to recognize to the lawyer that we want to collaborate, we want to facilitate this, but what are the long-term implications for the town? And then seems like it's a reasonable thing to do, is to not move ahead with, we're not pointing fingers at anybody, we're just saying, what is the long-term implications if the town starts to be providing the engineered solution, that kind of stuff. So.
I heard you make a noise, Alex, after Phil's suggestion, but I wasn't sure what it was.
I'm not sure either, Mary.
It was like oomph. When Phil suggested that the developer pay for Tyler to do a plan.
No, I think that makes some sense, actually. And so what I want to make clear is I respect Andrea's motion. I don't think it makes sense to spend money on an attorney for an option that maybe most of you aren't really comfortable with anyway. Maybe Marilee is the most uncomfortable with, but maybe some of you are also uncomfortable with the town, paying for that engineering. But if some legal guidance on the town's interest with regard to taking over that water and sewer line and the berm related to it going forward would be helpful, regardless of how you land on paying for any engineering to deal with these culverts. That could be helpful information, and I could work with Eric Bailey on that, since these are, water and sewer lines that his department is going to have to deal with when they eventually become the town's. So I'd be happy to do that. I just don't want to. I've had some experience with attorneys and how far they can spin a project and how many hours of billable time that becomes. And if you're sort of uncomfortable with the town paying for this engineering in the manner to which I propose, then maybe we ought to just take that off the table, and I can talk to the attorney about the broader issue. I can mention this, but I just don't want to throw the town's money away on an opinion about something that you maybe aren't inclined to support.
Alex, I'm beginning to wonder if we're not looking for a permanent solution to a temporary site. And
Well,
maybe just throwing the culvert in there is the solution in the near term. Until
Rather than having it engineered, you mean? Or
yeah, because
Yeah.
Because just thinking ahead, if Grabowski's development goes through, that could be $2,000 of engineering just tossed out.
right. The concern is that
Years from now.
that could be a long time, and it would be a shame to just do something with a good intent and make the situation worse, or at least, not just be throwing money after a solution that doesn't end up working. I don't think it's that complicated, Tom. In 2013, we were very close to just, working with Joe Bissonette to throw some culverts in. We didn't follow through on it. And
But you say we didn't follow through. It wasn't up to us to follow through on
but
it.
Speaking as the permitting entity or the permitting agency within the town, these are compliance issues that need to be dealt with. And part of the way we were involved was saying, let's find some resolution here. You got to get back in front of, sorry, not you. The Bissonette family has to get back in front of the DRB and get after the fact permits for that fill in the flood hazard area and to deal with the inappropriate drainage across that berm. So we would like to make that whole system be collaborative and happen. But there's different ways to parse who pays for it. So I get your concern. I understand that. And I'm connected as somebody who's trying to work with the parties to get a resolution. So you're looking at it fresh. Those are good eyes.
And I'll say there's two issues. One is the problem at hand and the need for Creekside to come up with a solution to the flooding that's happening.
Right.
And it sounds like the developer is in agreement. They're willing to consider the fact this is happening. I haven't been there, so I don't want to put words in their mouth. They consider the fact it's happening, and they are open to the idea of helping resolve it.
Yes.
For the smallest amount necessary to resolve it. I think what Andrea's is a much longer term thing is, here's some potential easement and infrastructure, and not unlike a road that we might end up having to take over. And, where along in that process does the town have responsibility, oversight? I'm not sure, and so I think that this is just a small piece of that. I mean, we're not talking about them putting in a couple culverts and now we have full responsibility for it. That process is going to happen further along. So, I mean, I would propose that you sit down with the parties one more time and say, hey, can we resolve this problem? It doesn't sound like the select board is at this point, ready to put money at engineering it for you, but maybe there's a way you can solve it without the town monetary support.
Well, and it may be a function of when you want to take that water and sewer line, and perhaps as a function of getting this resolved, you might be you might have that conversation sooner rather than waiting for some indeterminate time to eventually take the line. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I can talk to them about all that, sure.
I guess the point is, oh man, it just totally went out of my head. The town's interest is that the proper permit was not issued, right? Because there was fill being put in the flood. That's one of your interests.
Our interest is that we have a neighborhood that's experiencing some flooding and would
Right.
like some relief.
But that flooding is due to the development of this line being
Yes.
put in. And so if there had been review of this and attention, the developer would have been paying for the engineering of
Correct.
all of this ahead of
Yes,
time.
absolutely.
And so, I mean, I don't see why it's not the developer's responsibility to resolve this issue, because you would have asked for this information at that permitting time, at the time of the permit.
Yep.
So we're not asking for anything, we are only asking, the DRB is only asking for information that it should have had originally for this solution. So it seems like if we treat it as the permitting issue that it was, and wanting to work with them to bring it into compliance, we're just going back to the step where this would have been a legitimate request and need on the application.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I will tell you that when we first discovered the issue and brought it to the attention of the developer, the Bissonnette family didn't have this reaction, but the professionals working for them, the reaction was, we went through a very long review process and submitted all the materials you asked us to submit. This was not a permit you told us we needed. This is a design project, So there was some pushback on that front. I'm not saying we can't push right back and say, too bad, we missed something, but you also should have known, and we've got to get this figured out. Happy to do that. I'm just trying to get to the end of it as quickly as possible and trying to be collaborative about it. I understand your concerns about precedent and the normal way of a permit review.
You're also telling us, though, that the Bissonnette family is the party that's going to be building or paying for the solution.
Correct.
Yeah. So maybe the solution is to bypass the engineering part, since the whole thing is a temporary fix anyway, however long temporary is defined, and go right into the solution part with, best knowledge that we have without the engineering.
I'll talk to the parties some more. We'll put it back in that court and not have it be in yours. I think I'm getting that message fairly clearly.
Yeah,
So.
we don't want to come up with what the solution is.
Right.
But you can, certainly in your discussions,
You're
because
happy
you're
to have me help
experienced.
facilitate them figuring out the solution and implementing it.
Yes.
I understand. Okay.
So there is a motion that you made. I don't know if we want to continue with it or you want to withdraw it.
Well, I think I'll maybe leave it up to Alex to have further conversation, but if we're not approving the expenditure of any funds, then, and we can wait to talk about the need for further clarification on how this water and sewer line is going to go up, because
Right.
we really, I am not as confident as Aaron is to be recognizing this as a temporary solution. You know, I mean, we don't know, so.
Okay.
Maybe it does need to be in there because temporary is going to be 5 years. And we wouldn't want the neighborhood to be not having use of this field for 5 years, so. Go back.
Okay, so are we
I'm
good?
withdrawing my motion. That's
Okay.
okay.
Did anybody from the audience want to comment on this? No. I'm not going to forget to do that. No, and I shouldn't. So we'll move on to item 6. This was, I think, just a discussion about the Hannaford court decision, an update, opportunity to ask a question, I think, and no, I think there was an opportunity for a motion here to see, would we continue to have legal representation through the process as we've had up until now? I think, Alex, go ahead.
Hopefully you've all
So go ahead,
read-
Alex, explain the whole thing to us. We have 5 minutes.
You've read the information about the decision, so rather than going into that, I'm just going to say, I'm here to say, when this project was at the lower court level, the town was represented by Bud Allen, who was our town agent at the time. When the appeals moved to the Vermont Supreme Court, Bud recommended we hire a different attorney, and we hired David Rue from Stitzel, Page and Fletcher. Now that this project, at least the Act 250 side of it, has been remanded back to the lower court to talk about some issues, actually some of the issues that the town raised at the Supreme Court level, the lower court is looking for Bud Allen. He's not the attorney for the town anymore. So we need counsel, and I'm recommending you make a motion to select the attorney we used at the Supreme Court level. He's already communicated with me saying the court has already contacted him and they're looking to have a conference call like in December, maybe mid-December, and he wants to know if he's representing the town. So I think he should. He's the one who successfully argued our case at the Supreme Court level. But I think you should go on record, since the town, we don't have a formal town attorney at the moment. We're sort of doing it on a case-by-case basis. That's really the only reason I'm here. If you have questions about the 39 or 40-page decision, I'm happy to answer them for you or give you perspective. But otherwise, it's just that legal counsel representation.
It might be good, just so everybody hears at once, the couple of issues that have gone back down to the environmental court and what this lawyer or lawyers would be, again, defending the town's position.
So the Hannaford case was approved by the Development Review Board with regard to site plan. It was a 2-year process, but they did get an approval. That approval was appealed to the lower court. The environmental court is how it's typically referred to. That court upheld the DRB's approval. They tinkered a little bit, but they upheld the approval, and that decision was appealed to the Vermont Supreme Court. The Vermont Supreme Court reversed that decision. So that site plan approval by the town is effectively thrown out, and the lower court's approval of it. This project also required an Act 250 permit. Because it's a large enough project, and that's a state-level permitting review. That Act 250 permit was essentially granted. It was denied based on water supply, but we addressed that when we built our new well, so essentially it was an approval. That approval was appealed to the lower court. The lower court upheld it, and that was appealed then to the Supreme Court, same as the town's approval. The Supreme Court did not throw out the Act 250 permit. They remanded that back to the lower court to address several items, 2 of which were items that the town raised. So we at the Supreme Court level said, hey, you lower court judge, you deemed that a traffic light was necessary at the Route 116 Mechanicsville Road intersection for this project to move forward, and you ordered it thus. We think that was a mistake. We think further study is needed. There may be alternatives to a light there. And the Supreme Court agreed that the lower court did not give enough, did not take enough evidence on that. They didn't say the lower court was wrong. They just said there needs to be more conversation about that. And they said the town specifically should be given an opportunity to present its case about that. The other point that the town raised was that a post-construction traffic study that the Act 250 had required, the lower court said, nope, there doesn't need to be a post-construction traffic study. The mitigation that Hannaford has proposed will deal with the issues. We don't need to look at it after the fact. And the Supreme Court again agreed with the town and said, nope, that needs to be discussed further. And so that's another reason it was remanded to the lower court. So it makes sense to hire the attorney that represented us at the Supreme Court, because we will be arguing, if you want to keep involved in this, which I hope you do, even though it's costly, we will be arguing the exact same issues that were argued before the Supreme Court. So that's the rub of it. The only other wrinkle I'll mention is that when I talked to the attorney that represented us at the Supreme Court about the two permits, he agreed that the Supreme Court had reversed the site plan approval, which effectively means it gets to come back to this room and the DRB starts over. But he said there's potential that legally that the Hannaford attorney could ask the lower court to take it up and avoid having to come back to the town DRB level. And he said, I'm not sure what they're going to suggest. The conference call will flesh that out. So just know that. Again, all the more reason to have the town represented by council at these conference calls and all of that.
I mean, I think it's,
What grounds was the site plan review? Wasn't it a
Overturned.
setback issue?
Yeah, it was a very technical issue in which, and frankly, it's one that we missed at our local review process. So shame on us, kudos to the Responsible Growth Hinesburg's attorney for finding this. But when Commerce Park was approved as a subdivision in 1987, on the subdivision plat, the survey, they indicated a 75-foot building setback to the canal, which was consistent with our zoning regs at that time, which required 75 feet separation. When we reviewed the Hannaford proposal in 2010 through 2012, we had changed that setback to 25 feet from the canal. So Hannaford's proposal was consistent with our canal setback from the zoning regulations, but was not consistent with the filed and approved plat from the subdivision. We missed that, and so did Hannaford. And so the Supreme Court said, no, you have to comply with the plat, and so they overturned it based on that. Now, there are options that Hannaford has in terms of redesigning their site to comply with the 75 feet, or coming back to the DRB to say, hey, you've changed your canal setback. We'd like the subdivision to reflect that and be reduced to 25, in which case their project would comply. But I don't want to go there. That's Hannaford's, cup of tea as to how they want to argue that. But that's why it was overturned, was as a result of this previously approved survey that was on file that indicated the 75 feet.
so the question we have really is, do we want to continue to have legal representation concerning really traffic concerns? One, the post-traffic study. Two, what the best solution is for Mechanicsville Road intersection.
Yes, and if any other issues do come up, which they will at the lower court level, you may want to participate in those as well, even if you didn't in the original round. Stormwater, I think, is one of the bigger ones that was also, it was remanded because of that as well.
Any other discussion? Andrea?
I think it's really prudent that the town have this attorney represent us, and that the select board be kept informed of all the issues that may come up, and it may be appropriate for the whole select board to have an opportunity to meet with the attorney so that we can fully appreciate what all the nuances are, and that would most likely be an executive session. So I would definitely make a motion to engage David Rue of Stitzel, Page, and Fletcher as the town's representative for any upcoming Hannaford supermarket proceedings in the Vermont Superior Court, i.e. Environmental Division, and further the director, the Director of Planning and Town Engineer shall work with Mr. Rue and report back to the Select Board prior to incurring, I wouldn't even say significant legal expenses, prior to any decisions being made on how we proceed. I don't feel comfortable having the attorney proceed without the full board understanding what we are arguing.
Absolutely, second that. Yeah.
And just for the discussion person, he indicated a willingness to come and meet with you.
Okay.
I told him, wait, let's make sure
Yeah.
they want to continue
Yeah.
and that they want you to represent the town, and then let's have that conference call so you know what's actually happening.
Yeah.
I think that would be good. It might be a good time to get an update after we understand what we're getting
So
into.
the conference call is with all the attorneys?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my understanding.
Right. Well, I guess it would be good for us to know ahead of time what's going to be discussed at the conference call so that,
We don't. It's the court. It's a court-driven call to say, what I think the court is going to say is, here's what happened. How do you want to proceed? Mostly with that question directed at Hannaford, because they're driving the situation.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, we've had a few of these where there have been conference calls. I always wonder, like, well, hey, Bud, when Bud was our attorney, don't you want me on that conference call just so we can, chat? And he's like, no, this is procedural, just to understand, are there going to be further arguments, or are there going to be motions? What's the status, essentially?
right. Well, I guess that would be good for us to know as well, so as soon as the conference call
We'll
is.
report back to you after
Yes,
that. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yes.
David Rue said that he thought the December 4th or the 11th, but he wasn't sure. It hadn't been nailed down yet.
Okay.
So by then, we would know, or at that conference call, we would know what Hannaford is planning on
Yeah.
doing.
At this point, it's just what you read in the paper based on whether their attorney's been quoted or not.
All right, are there any more questions or discussion? Any from the audience members? No? So we have a motion. I guess all those, and is seconded. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. So there's none opposed, the motion passed. And I think I heard say, have our representative, our lawyer, just keep us informed. I think that's it for you, Alex, unless you're here to also discuss capital budget, capital improvement plans. Yeah, all right, yeah. All right, do you want to lead us through this?
Sure. So you guys had this as in your packet, I believe, at the October 2nd.
I didn't have it, so, and I think that's an issue with the way I
Okay.
update. If I only get that first update. If you add something else in, I can't seem to
Okay.
get it. But
So it should be in your October 2nd Dropbox, is a draft version of the narrative for the capital.
just recently?
No, the last time you made that
Oh,
comment.
maybe, yeah.
Draft, a
If that
version of
was
the
for that,
narrative
was that
for the
for that?
capital budget, as well as the capital improvement plan and other associated documents.
I can probably find it.
Yep, I believe it's number 5, and then A,
Yeah, if you have
B,
it, send it
and,
to me.
A and B,
yep.
I think.
And so I think within 5B, there's, if you look down at the bottom of the page, there's several different pages within that Excel spreadsheet. So again, we're just looking at this draft. Tonight there really wasn't a discussion at the October 2nd. It was just sort of giving you guys a preview and giving you time to be looking at it and thinking about the capital budget. The narrative is really sort of a document that's sort of our guiding plan for the next 5 years of capital expenditure items. You guys have talked about it at some point of anything with having an estimated value of 5,000 or greater to be incorporated into the capital plan. And so this is equipment, buildings, all different types of things that go in that. For equipment, there's a replacement schedule that we associate with that, and so you're thinking about if it's something that lasts 10 years or 5 years, and so then you start planning for that replacement. So with that, I've reached out to department heads, asked them to take a look at that draft, if there's anything that they have that needs to be changed, or maybe something removed from it, or if there's something they'd like for us to consider to have incorporated into the capital budget. Those are things that they are looking at right now. Alex is here to take notes of you guys' discussion, because maybe you guys have some other ideas of things you'd like to see in it or changes that need to be made. And he's going to help me with making those revisions to the budget.
Go ahead.
I would say that would be also good to, I think, reach out to some of our committees, Planning Commission, because there's things identified, I think, or even just rereading of the town plan, of what's in the town plan that we could be planning for capital-wise.
Right.
Off the top of my head, what comes to me is thinking about the cemeteries. I heard that the town of Hartford feels like they're running out of cemetery space. I don't think that we're in that position, but I do think that there's lots of or there may be opportunities to think about our cemetery and how that will function into the future. That's certainly long-term planning.
Right.
And sidewalks. Off and on, we've talked about community center kind of stuff. So I think even if we don't have plans, just to, maybe be putting it as just a word in the capital improvement. So, I mean,
Those
a
are
couple minutes of thinking.
Yeah, those are certainly things that could be included in the narrative, so we could be thinking about, even if we aren't budgeting money for it right now, but just sort of keeping a list. And Alex and I were talking about some of the sidewalk scoping studies that have been done that may not be included in there right now, that we might want to have, so that we're at least thinking about them and thinking about the dollar amount associated with it.
So I think, and we talked about this briefly, I think today, that we're really looking to, I'll say, beef up the way we do capital, do a better job of planning capital, maybe be a little more visible. I think over the last few years, I'm just speaking for myself, it's not always been clear what goes on the capital budget, what doesn't. We've changed a little bit. And so I think there's a real benefit to being really clear what goes on the capital budget. And I mentioned to Renee that it might be hard in 1 year, this year in particular, since we don't have a lot of extra time, that, we may not get there and get to the perfect capital budget, and there's probably a lot of discussion of, what that really should be, so there should be a lot of input on that. But I didn't know if there were a couple of, basic policies that we want to say, for this next budget, here's what we'd like to incorporate, to take out of the normal budget items and clarify in the capital budget. So, and I just put that out there. I haven't come up with anything in particular, but I didn't know if maybe Renee, you might say, here's what I think would be good to have in this year's, clarify in this year's capital budget.
Well, there's certainly things you want to prioritize, what you really do want to see in FY19, because those are capital transfers that need to be made if they're from the general fund budget. What's the high priority list of things that we want to start planning for?
So I do see that we have something under stormwater currently in there.
Yep.
So it means that we budgeted $5,000 last year.
Last year.
And that's just kind of going to be building up in our capital reserve fund.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's good
I
to see.
believe there's 7,500 targeted for FY19 is how that was set up.
Okay, yeah. And so we might want to think about whether we want to increase that, or I like your idea of policies. I think, looking at our town plan again and what those goals are might be a way of us figuring out how to marry the town plan with the capital budget. And I can't think off the top of my head right now how to do,
Right.
what other things are in there, but.
But I think that also goes along with the idea of bringing all the boards together and having the chairs meeting on either a quarterly basis or something, and using the town plan as our guiding document, or maybe some other priority items that you guys have decided on, and then bringing all the boards together, and so that they can talk about how to distribute those priority list.
So all water and wastewater capital is completely separate from this,
It
regardless
hasn't
of...
been incorporated into this.
It would be?
It hasn't been.
Oh, it hasn't been.
It's been a separate thing. I've looked at other municipalities, and sometimes they do combine them, even though if it's a separate enterprise fund, they just list them together so you're able to see those things together, but we haven't done that.
But we could develop a separate capital improvement plan for water and sewer so that,
Certainly a good
I
idea.
think that's probably as I was driving around today and seeing other water people out there, that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah, based on our aging infrastructure, based on the things that are with our, what's coming here for our wastewater plant, it's certainly something we should be thinking about. So tonight is sort of an opportunity for you guys to generate any of the ideas you have, or seeing if there's things that you're seeing that need to be changed, and we're here to take notes, and so that we can make some of those changes.
How is the maintenance of our buildings taken care of in terms of our budget?
So there is a line item under buildings and facilities, but there's certainly, that's something to look at. And as far as, all of our buildings, just to make sure that we have the appropriate money set aside, or if that's something that we need to be setting aside.
already done now,
Yeah,
you're
but that's
saying.
more of a general fund type of line item.
Right, it's not shown necessarily in the capital budget. It's, I don't know, $5,000 to, put aside, you're going to have repairs to make. I think we've done some items for the town hall. So I think the question is, we're saying we've given it this number of $5,000. If the particular item isn't $5,000 or more, it's not considered capital, but it doesn't mean it wants to be buried somewhere. You certainly want to have some visibility.
I don't think maintenance items tend to go into capital, but if you're looking at replacement, so if we need to replace the roof of this building, things like that, those are the capital items that you want to start planning for. So you want to get a,
Right, and sorry.
that's okay, go ahead.
It doesn't mean you wouldn't say, you could make a decision that says, we're going to put aside $4,000 a year for capital improvements for the town hall, for example. And you don't know, I don't know, maybe in 10 years it needs a new roof, or maybe it needs new windows, or maybe it needs a new furnace. And only as, you get better planning and better visibility, then you say, all right, this is what we think it takes to maintain a building of this age.
Well,
So,
not to maintain it. I think we know that
yeah,
there's ongoing
yeah.
maintenance, but to be building up a reserve fund that we can do those major
Yeah.
plans, and so that we're not borrowing money, or we're not having to be caught off guard.
In the same
Fair
way.
amount of buildings.
Yeah, in the same way you're putting money aside maybe for a dump truck, because
Yes.
15 years from now, you're not going to have that same dump truck.
Right.
And those are the things, so you want to really look at it in a building. And so this building, it's a good example. So your roof, we need to know how much longer we have, what winter things that we need to do as far as roof replacement or windows or whatever it is.
So, I would propose, I think and this is my thinking, so if anybody else looks at this differently, this is a chance to sort of take a look at this capital budget and sort of put together some sort of basic policies that we will follow moving forward. We won't nail it this year by any means because we just don't have the wherewithal to do that. But I think we sort of could set some basic policies, and maybe we say, look, every major building or structure, every major piece of capital equipment, which this building is, we should consider having if it's appropriate, having a line item that is to provide capital money for long-term maintenance. So you could say that about sidewalks, you could say that about major buildings, and in the same way, you say it about some of your major equipment. You could say it about the computer system, you could say it about, whatever that you maintain on a regular basis every year, but occasionally you got to replace it all, or you've got to do something that exceeds a normal maintenance and becomes a capital item.
We might also be considering, and in terms of our roads, I mean, every year we put a budget item in there for culverts, but I think we have enough information about our culverts and so that we're actually looking out 15 years of knowing that some of those culverts we might be replacing with bridges, and that we're building that reserve fund for infrastructure improvements that are more than what we are able to accomplish with the just ongoing of culverts that need immediate replacement because they're rusted out or they're really undersized and they're causing problems. Again, I think that we need, even though we're doing a capital budget for 5 years, what it really is saying, let's look out 15 or 20 years and try to anticipate what our needs are then. It's not really for the first those 5 years, it's what we're going to be needing in 20 years that we're starting to accumulate those funds. So in terms of readjusting our thinking, I think that's...
We do have a culvert replacement repair project in the capital.
Right, but I think that's for...
Specific.
Is that, Mike, for specific culverts that you know of? So I think it's more like trying to anticipate whether there's, like the Texas Hill one, that really only showed up on our radar for the last 2 years. And so let's think about, okay, well, what's the next one that we need to do and be beyond that 5-year thinking.
Mike, wasn't there just a culvert inventory done recently? Yeah. So
Right, so some of those may be upgraded to being bridges. We'd want to make sure that they're AOP compatible and all that. It should show the AOP, the aquatic organism passage stuff. There's a separate, there is one that does that. And so even though, we have the inventory, and then the trick is to look at that and think 15 years from now, which of those projects are we going to try and do?
Getting back to I would make the recommendation that at least we add a line that's either town hall or municipal buildings.
Yeah, right. Maybe, I don't know if you have the clarity for, there's, I don't know how many buildings qualify. We'd probably have 6 or 8, I don't know. Not the vestry. Sorry. And a big one coming, that's right. So, you might either just, this first go around, just sort of say, capital improvements for town buildings, and maybe we might have some potential examples of what it might be, but put a little money in there. And then next year, we might be able to add a little more clarity to it. But if we know specific
to the furnace that we had to buy for town hall just a couple of years ago, which there was no planning ahead of time. So that's just a prime example.
Yeah. And we know that's going to happen again. So I think another one we have, you see, so for example, the police vehicles, you show in the capital plan this sort of replacement process, which is good to see. I mean, I think it's well, it's shown fairly well. But, there's an assumption there, we continue with this process of leasing.
Right.
And, the leases are, you could make an argument, interest rates have continued to be very low. And the value of money, it might make sense that that's a good process. I could easily argue that. Taking today's money and saving it for 3 years may not be the best thing when you can borrow it for so cheap. But, we should have some good discussions on, is this, right now we're sort of locked into that process because we haven't got any capital. So if a vehicle or a dump truck or something like that needs to be replaced, we have no capital that we can, other than the value of what it is when we sell it. The one we're replacing.
We might also be investing in more renewable energy products for the town.
Energy.
Investments in the, capped landfill.
We talked about, energy audits, and so
Yeah.
potentially to, any of those projects could easily be a capital project for any of the older buildings.
So I think we already talked about it earlier, but looking at the town plan, what those high priority items are, and are those some things that should be incorporated into the capital budget?
Might be the point soon too, where the Bissonnet Fields line gets swapped out for more of a recreation facilities line. Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Moving it into the rec. Moving it into.
No, just changing the scope of it, because
Okay.
the Bissonnet Fields are going to be close to completed, and we'll see where we are in terms of finances for that. It might be, you might want to start mowing it in-house. But you might
That
want
wouldn't
to,
necessarily be capital, but there
well,
might be
you
other.
might need equipment though for it.
Right.
Right.
But I mean, the fields themselves are going to be done, but there's long-term plans for buildings and things like that. That's part of that would be part of a capital plan.
Sure, but I'm just saying, instead of just keeping it as only Bissonnet
Oh,
Fields,
right.
expanding
Just-
it out, because
just
there's
recreation
other
facilities.
recreation
For sure,
facilities, yeah.
For sure. Yep.
Yep. And I think I had started off the budget process saying, what are some of our goals? And I had said one of my goals I would like to pursue is that we, do a really good job of maintaining what we already have. And so this capital discussion, and I think the sidewalks is a really good example, I think most people find them to be valuable. They cost a lot of money to put in, even though it may not be all of our money. It is a lot of money. And so there'll be some maintenance associated with it to maintain them.
And they don't last forever, so there's going to be
Right.
replacement sections that need to be replaced too, so we need to plan for that.
Is this helpful for you?
No,
you
I think this is helpful, and Alex is helping me by making notes of all of this, and Mike, did you have anything to add to this?
See you, Wayne.
So unless
Okay.
you guys have anything else, that was kind of what I was looking for, is just some ideas and discussion and get some direction from you of where you want us to go with this.
I think if you have more questions, or, if you water it down to here's what we heard, here are the couple of, changes we'll try to do or incorporate this into this year's budget, and then you could just share that with the board. I don't, unless somebody sees something they totally don't like, I assume. Yeah.
I think looking
Yeah.
at the official map too is another policy thing of how we incorporate the official map into the capital plan or something.
So we'll make these changes, and then the revisions will be presented at I think it's the December 11th select board meeting? So January is when you finalize it. So we present it again on the earlier end, and then it has to be finalized and voted on, or approved prior to town meeting. Because it will go into the town report as well. Not the entire narrative, but
Yeah.
what's for FY19.
So maybe I'm just repeating myself. So what might be good to come out of the synopsis of what we heard, for me, I think, would be just the basic policy of when an item is on this plan, what qualifies it to be there? So that, and maybe it's just 2 or 3 items that sort of says, here's a limit of a dollar amount, here's a description of what kind of goes on there.
So in the
you
beginning
sort
of the
have that.
narrative, it talks about, I think when
Okay.
you guys developed the capital budget, the $5,000 estimated value was
Okay.
what the criteria was for something to be incorporated into
Yeah.
the capital budget. And then there was when the estimated costs were greater than the $400,000, then
And
that's,
it would go to town meeting.
Right.
That was,
That's
yeah,
a
that's
separate-
another, so that's good. And I think you may say on there that you may be collecting capital money and you don't necessarily know exactly what it's going toward, but that it will be applied toward, if it's, for buildings.
Yeah,
We don't know the furnace is going to break, but if we had $20,000 of capital put aside, as things happen or as we approach the need to replace a roof, we could say, well, we could have an agreement, or we could we could vote on that's where we're going to apply that capital.
you do want to be as specific as possible in the
Mm-hmm.
narrative, just so that you don't develop a capital
Savings
fund
plan.
that could be like a slush
Yeah,
fund.
Yeah, no,
Right, so you
no.
want to be very
But I think
clear.
it could say,
Right.
for capital improvements for
Right.
the town hall.
Yeah.
And the capital fund carries over differently year to year than the regular general
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
fund.
Yep.
And then how do we safeguard around making sure that the capital fund stays secure as money saved as opposed to borrowed for, say, something that we're a deficit spending on? How does that process work?
As far as,
So we're short on money because we overspent on legal fees.
Right.
We still got to pay the lawyers. Where do we get the money? So, we have this capital money here. Is it?
no.
How does that work?
right. No, that
What
capital
prevents that from happening?
is only for expenditures that are, like I said, 5,000 or greater. It's not to
But
use.
how does it, how is it, what's the safeguard? How does that work? So that money isn't touched.
It's budgeted.
Right.
How she keeps these pots of money.
And the
Yeah.
auditors,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's capital reserves.
there's capital, right.
protocols there, except that the auditors do, look over those things. But it is fairly complicated how different monies are kept and whether they're in separate accounts or in a separate reserve fund versus just being carried on the books.
They're not in separate accounts, so they are just in the books, but there's capital reserve funds, so those are targeted for a specific use, and those are only used for that purpose and carried over. But yes, they could certainly speak to that a little more, and the auditors are sort of guiding them as well.
And we could add that to, the policy that
Right,
might
that's a
say.
policy
I mean,
thing that we
there's
need to
some that we
spell
can't,
out.
yeah.
Right.
There's
Yes,
some
yeah.
that we can't touch. I mean,
Point of this conversation.
there are some that we could, as the year went on, we might be looking over and we'd be like, we're in trouble here. We'd look over to Renee and she might say, well, here's, we could make that decision. But, maybe the policy says we don't make we have one that says it would be a town meeting, but it would have to be in the next year's budget to say, we've chosen to not fund this capital budget this year because we really don't have the money. Or, we've got enough, we're going to leave it at 10. We've done that, the town's done that before, right? They've gotten to 10 and they say, well, we don't have any money to put in there this year, even though the desire was to get it to 20 at some point. So that's a yearly
Which is
decision.
different than borrowing from it, that's just
Or
not
stealing
funding
from me.
it.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah, so. But I think you're right, there are certain controls on however
But it
it's,
would probably be good to have it kind of written down
Yep.
of the difference between the capital reserve fund, the unreserved, and the, you know, and what we can.
Operating budget.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would be
Operate,
really
yeah.
good to have.
I agree. I think that's something that is my goal is for everyone to become a little more familiar with the whole process, because I think the capital budget has been confusing, and I think it's becoming more clear. We're doing a better job with it, but I think we still have a ways to go, and so that I want you guys to be able to understand it. I need to understand it, as well as all the department heads and people, so that we know.
Just in this policy document, just the terminology, just sort of saying, this is the term for this is the term
Right.
for that, so then we're all sort of speaking the same
Because there's
language.
financial definitions
Yeah.
for those different terms, and we may be just using it as regular language.
Yep.
But there's definitely a financial jargon that the auditors are speaking that we may not, we hear these as English language words, but they have a specific definition when the auditors say it.
That's a good idea. All right.
Okay, very good. The next item is Town Administrator Report. It's in
Okay.
our packet, but I don't know if you want to highlight anything in particular, or anybody has questions?
Do you want me to just go through the list?
Sure, why not?
All right, so we have the health order. The Select Board and the Town Health Officer will be convening as the local Board of Health at a special meeting on November 27th. And so this will serve as a hearing on that matter.
And that's at 7 o'clock, and so I'll personally be going into my How to Be a Select Board Member book that I have and say, how a health, yeah, how do we meet, yeah.
Board of Health.
Right,
Yes.
Board of Health.
Yep.
Because it's a little different.
So you all,
Procedurally different.
that would be a good
Procedurally
idea for
different.
all of you to review
Yeah.
that prior
Yeah.
to next Monday. The initial budget discussions with department heads are ongoing. I've received a lot of the department budgets, and so I'll be setting up those meetings that we talked about that will be with the department heads, myself, and each select board member who's adopted that department or departments. So those will be during that week of, whatever the week, it was like a Thursday through the following Friday.
Right.
And I'm gonna
Starting next, not Thanksgiving, but the Thursday
The
after that.
after, yeah, and so I'm going to try to get them on the earlier end of that time frame, just so that it gives us time to be thinking about it and putting it together before the December 11th presentation. So if anyone has some specific times that they know they're not going to be available during that week or the first half of that time period, let me know. And if mornings work best for you or afternoons, I mean, obviously the department heads, this needs to work for them as well. So, but if you know there's times that absolutely don't work for you, just send me a quick email and let me know. Or if there's times that are better for you.
And so it can go either way. I guess you might say to Renee, I'm not available Friday, so you know. But it might also be good to get whatever schedule you have out there so we can
Yeah.
all see where we're scheduled and how much time commitment there really is.
Right.
And so I'll hand this out. This is, I should have emailed it, but I printed them, I don't know why. But this is the assignments that we put together, and then there were some changes. I don't know if I captured them all, but I'll put this out, and Renee will maybe look at this when she's scheduling things and try to, if it's possible, block some things together.
What's the
But-
week that you're saying you're scheduling, the weeks, the dates?
Let's see.
Is it the 30th or is that
I think we
Thursday?
had that in it's a Thursday, I can probably look at the calendar.
The Thursday after
I
Thanksgiving,
think it's the Thursday after Thanksgiving through the following
December 1st?
next week.
Might be I think Friday's December 1st, so it'd be the 30th.
30th.
The 30th through the 6th.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, trying to schedule them on the earlier end of that time frame.
Yep.
Yep.
That's just 1 week.
It is a week
okay.
and 2
Okay.
days.
Okay.
It's a budget bonanza.
Yes, right.
Oh, so this got moved So you're now Trails, Andrea?
That was an email that I picked
Yeah,
up,
that's
so.
fine. I already talked with Lenore.
Okay.
And I actually, really, the only thing she had was what she mentioned tonight.
Yeah, okay.
AARRC is,
Agency Request Review Committee.
okay.
And where's the Affordable Housing Committee?
That-
Oh, up
yeah,
there.
that went
Aaron's got
underneath
that, okay.
Aaron.
Yep.
Sorry to disrupt the
That's right.
flow.
You know, the library should also, you know, be in the capital budget. We can ask them anyway, and get them thinking a little bit
Well,
ahead.
yeah, I can do that.
Should it really? Because I thought that's what they use their
Well, they
endowment
might,
for.
but it still is, this is kind of, it's a planning document, not just a budgetary item, so they may be using
They may have their
their
own.
interest funds for those capital improvements, but, I mean, we can.
They do refer to capital items, so I suspect they have their own sort of capital.
Yeah.
Fund, but that's a question you can ask, and so we can look at it.
All right.
All right, so.
Who has the fire, oh, Marilee has the fire.
Lots of applications have been received.
75.
Well, more than that by now, a lot more than that. Again, I mean, there's a lot of weeding through that will happen between now and then, but.
You have a couple people looking through all of them?
Well, we will have, yeah, there's going to be a committee, but yes, it's going to be quite a task just organizing them.
I think it'll be easier than we think.
Oh, good.
I really do.
Yeah.
You're going to wait till the application deadline on the 27th before you start to go through them, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, unless I can get them organized in a manner so I can put it in a shared folder so people can be looking at them prior to that. I mean, that was my original thought, but then I didn't have any idea that we'd have that many, so.
I'm going to help with that.
Okay, that'd be great.
Do you know where where most of the responses came from?
I mean, the majority are in this area, or
No, but I mean,
Vermont.
from what
Oh.
advertising?
Online.
The online version of Indeed, definitely. Brought in a lot. So we have tentatively the water supply development agreement will be scheduled for the December 4th meeting. So that's tentative, but I just wanted to have that out there so people are aware. And then I've been reaching out to board, committee, and commission members or their chairs to looking at the people who their terms are about to expire to see if they're interested in being reappointed. So I'm hoping to take care of that at the December 4th meeting as well, depending on what the response is. And we are about to submit the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program application for potential funding for our new sand salt shed. So that should be going out hopefully tomorrow. And I want to thank Andrea for her support on that. And we did submit the Better Back Roads grant for the stormwater mitigation work along a segment of Levine Hill Road. So that has been submitted. And the union negotiations, as we know, were really close to being finalized. And then the union rep left.
Isn't that something?
Has been the case,
Like
has been the
days
case,
before.
yes. So starting over with a new one, not really starting over, but I'm going to have to kind of get him up to speed. So our next meeting will be November 29th. So we're not quite as close, but
You're not taking that personally.
and maybe it's me because I guess I have to think about that. And next you guys are up. I think that's all I have for town administrator report.
Okay, any comments? Select Board Forum? Andrea?
I would like to suggest that we go back to meeting downstairs in that room, other than at meetings where we think we're going to have a crowd. I mean, we had a crowd today, but that crowd certainly could have fit there. I think it would really relieve staff from needing to set this stuff up every meeting. Also, VCAM some of their equipment is downstairs. It would save them. I think the times when we have a large meeting, we can come up here. We wouldn't have to be heating this big room.
Having a meeting in the dark.
What?
It's so dark in this
Yes. So I'd like to suggest that we go back to that nice room downstairs.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, with the thought of maybe revisiting this topic again when it gets to be spring. It's nice to be in this room in the summertime, I guess.
Okay.
The only issue with that, unless we have our curtains back, is the lighting issue. But, yeah.
Or maybe we'll just plan bigger meetings.
Yeah, right. Generate some controversy, huh? True. I also got an email from, can I go on?
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay.
Well, on that topic, I think we should just explore that just a little more, I
Okay.
think. What's, Marilee, any thoughts or concerns on that?
I'm surprised to hear this room is heated.
You should have felt that when I first came in here earlier today to set up, it was rather chilly, so.
So,
It sounds good to me, and being around that table rather than way across this horseshoe, I like the idea.
Yeah, what we set up? Like this down there, like the DRB does?
Probably what the DRB does, I
Yeah.
would suspect.
Yeah.
Oh, the way the DRB does?
I would
as opposed to sitting around the table? I guess we could work with VCAM. What's the easiest way for him to capture us?
Uh-huh.
But
I think the way you guys set it up this way is just so the audience feels like they're part of your conversations.
yeah.
yeah.
But that's, we can.
Well,
we'll
we
talk
used to
about
have
that.
just people come up to the table when we sat around the table.
Kind of doing that.
Yeah, but everybody was much closer to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd be open to that too, and certainly we could look ahead and, allow Renee to say, I think there's going to, I think there's going to be a lot of people, or we might say, this one's probably going to have a lot of people, and, move it up here, we know how to set it up. It probably would be less work. I mean, so maybe we should float that idea out there that, just let people know we might be changing our venue a little bit. Somebody might have some input one way or the other, but the sound will be better, and that's
Right.
always been an issue here, so
Setup
it's
will be
not a bad
easier.
idea. Maybe we shoot for I don't know, January 1st?
Why did we move up here? Why did we move up here? Do we remember? Why we chose to do that?
I
Just to
don't,
use the room, maybe? I don't know.
I don't remember if they just felt like
I
the
think it
select
was
board.
believed that it had a more formal feel to it, and
I don't mind meeting up here, but it is a lot of extra work for
Yeah.
everybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, if there's going to be a good crowd, for sure, up
Yeah.
here, without any hesitation, but on the average meeting.
In addition to the staff, it also would be easier for VCAM to have
Yeah.
one meeting space that they're doing rather than up and down.
Okay, so I think, I'm all right with leaving it up to Renee. It sounds like it's good to go. We probably should get the word out there, however we do, that this is a consideration. Maybe just in the agenda, maybe it shows it, I don't know. And then whenever, what the logistics will be for making that change.
Perhaps that's something we put in our little meeting recap
Yeah,
for tonight's
yeah,
meeting.
that'd be perfect, yeah?
And we can always have signs on the door if it's upstairs.
Go downstairs.
Downside.
Right,
Like-
yeah.
Yep.
Any other select board? Yes, Andrea?
Oh, I'd gotten an email, I think Phil got it also, from Richard Watts, who is very interested. He works in transportation at the university, and it was suggested that he might be interested in being our rep to the TAC, the RPC, and he's particularly interested in all aspects of transportation, but the bus. And so if we want to put that on the agenda to make that appointment, that would be nice. And I think that was, I think I might have had a third, but
Okay, anyone else?
Have one.
Tom, yeah, please.
So The big event over at the Old Lantern, the Quadra fundraiser for the Bissonnet Field project. January 5th is coming together nicely. Once again, we're happy to say Lampman's will be our presenting sponsor. Again, I think this is the 5th year. I think they've done it every year. So get your tickets. They're now at the Jiffy Mart. Same price as last year. We'll have food, the whole shebang. So looking forward to a really good year this year.
I'll be here this year. Good. So I had the two items. One, I wanted to just hand out the budget assignments. I guess that's the word, assignments. The other one was I haven't had a chance to, but I had said I would work on select board policy and sort of committee norms. So it is on my list. I'm staring at it every day. So one of these days I'll get it out there and just float it by everybody. Is that it for select board forum?
Did we want to discuss what will go into the Front Porch Forum update? The recap? Short of everything, I guess, which would be the default, I guess.
Well, certainly, I think the Lake Iroquois.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep.
The fact they just came and made a presentation, and they're still waiting to hear about
Yeah.
their permit.
Yep.
Yeah, keeping in mind that all of these updates are 2 sentences at most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like,
Yeah.
and discussion of use of the $30,000 that was, there was discussion, no decisions were made on the $30,000 that had been approved by voters.
Maybe you say in anticipation of the budget season, we had a discussion on capital budgeting and the process associated with that.
And maybe encouraging citizens to participate between now and January in the budget, that this is how policy is established, by how much money we put towards things. So if you want to make a change, show up.
Do we want to put something, even though it wasn't part of our meeting, something about the town garage is like fully mobilized and construction is starting?
Starting or started?
Started.
Started.
Yeah.
When did it start? Last week?
I thought your answer to that was going to be 1984. All right.
So yes, I can include that.
Do we want in the recap about on the December 4th meeting for the draft development, water source?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to just
Yeah.
What was
put that out there for the water supply development agreement. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tentatively scheduled for the December 4th.
And
select
I
board.
guess the assumption is we have that agreement, it's been sort of, I'll say, blessed by everybody, and then it could be public at that point.
Yeah, I mean, so our attorney has reviewed it, made some edits, and now it's going to the developer to just make sure they're okay with it. And then if both parties are fine, then that's when it goes to the select
Yeah.
board.
So are you suggesting we would put that in our Front Porch Forum post?
Just to let people know.
Upcoming.
that
Because I
that's an-
thought we were just recapping what we've done. I don't,
Tool to get, to make, it's a communication tool for the board to communicate to the public on the activities that we're involved with, including what we've done, but also certainly to message out. So one of the things that we had talked about was making sure that people knew the activities that we were both doing and preparing for, so that way there was activity and participation from the citizens. Just like Andrea just said, hey, now's the time to get involved in the budget process. We certainly talked about the budget tonight, but these decisions are coming, they're on the horizon, and that was sort of the idea of this tool. if that answers your question.
As part of this meeting, we not only talked about things that were on the agenda tonight, but we also talked about things that are upcoming on the agenda. And so as part of that recap, this is an upcoming agenda item.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yep.
Should we put in there the caveat that this is just a sample of what we're discussing?
Yes.
And have you done that?
Did you see the last one?
I probably did, but I didn't
Yeah.
pay much attention. I was here.
And there's a link to the
yeah.
Minutes in the
Okay.
agenda, the
Just wanna make sure
page.
That it is just a recap, and there's a link to both the minutes and to the
Okay.
video.
All right.
A recap of some of the items we
Kind of
discussed,
like
just so
a teaser,
they know.
so you know what's going on. If you're interested, you go into it. If you're not, you just keep reading. Yeah.
Yeah, this certainly in no way replaces our minutes or anything.
Or being at the meeting.
Or being at the meeting, yes.
Okay. So the next item is minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from October 16th?
Actually, that's a
Oh.
typo. It's
Oh.
November 6th.
Oh, yeah, that's right, November
Just didn't.
6th.
And thank you, Mary Lou, for
I was here. So was Tom, that's what I heard. Do I have a motion?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm just reading them now. I didn't see them before.
Yeah. No, I didn't. That was my
okay. Yeah.
error.
I think you did send them out, though.
I did send them
look
out
at
by
it. Yeah,
email,
okay.
and I put them in your
Yeah.
Dropbox today, but I hadn't caught that, and Marilee sent
Val
me an
always
email.
gets them to me, so they're always on the website too. Usually by Thursday.
Oh,
Is there enough time for you to look at them, or do you want to push them out to the next meeting?
I don't know. If somebody else has read them, then that's okay with me.
I
I
read them.
looked at them.
Okay.
I'm happy to move to approve the minutes of November 6, 2017, as written.
Second?
Could you give you just a second, Andrea?
Yep, that's fine.
We're ahead of schedule.
Never say that. Never say that.
Because we haven't had our executive session.
Right.
We are not ahead of schedule.
I mean, when you're at the Red Sox game and the other team hasn't, and it's almost, and you're 5 innings in and the guy's got a no-hitter, do you say, hey,
no-hitter thing.
yeah, hey, we're got a no-hitter?
You got going.
And just to be clear, we're 2 minutes behind schedule.
Oh, are we? Oh.
Didn't want to make your
Right.
too excited.
You ready? Okay, so the motion is to approve the minutes from November 6th, 2017 as written. All those in favor say aye.
Aye? Aye.
Aye. None opposed, the motion passed. Next item is consider approving the warrants.
I'll make the motion. Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye?
Aye. None opposed, the motion passed. And now we will consider going into, having a motion to move into executive session, just to have a discussion and an update on the, I'll say, agreement that was made many years ago concerning Observatory Road, turning that into a Class 3 road. There's been some discussion between the two parties. The town is one party. So if we're in agreement,
To go into executive session for discussion of the Observatory Road, it would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage because the Select Board risks disclosing its negotiation strategy if it's discussed the proposed contract terms in public.
Second.
all those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye, so none opposed, the motion passed. We'll need a second motion, and we'll mention to include Select Board members, Renee and Mike Anthony.
I move the Select Board enter executive session under provisions of 1 VSA, Section 313A1, to include Renee and Mike.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed, so the motion passed. So we will move into executive session. We'll end the broadcast. If there are any actions, there are none expected, but if there are any actions made, we will come out of executive session and make that action, and it will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. Okay.